In the sleepy town of Waverly, there was a house that no one dared to enter after dark. It stood on the edge of town, cloaked in ivy and mystery. For as long as anyone could remember, it had been inhabited by a single resident, a sleek, black cat named Shadow. Shadow was no ordinary cat. Legends whispered that he was as old as the house itself, watching over it and its inhabitants with an eerie, almost supernatural vigilance. Generations of families had lived there, each one falling under Shadow's watchful eye. Some said he was a guardian, others claimed he was a curse. When the Connors family moved in, they were unaware of the house's peculiar history. Sarah, Tom, and their young daughter Emily were drawn to the house's antique charm and spacious rooms. Shadow greeted them on the front steps, his emerald eyes gleaming with a knowing intensity. "Look, Mommy, a kitty!" Emily exclaimed, reaching out to pet him. Shadow purred, weaving between her legs with an elegance that belied his age. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. "Hello, Shadow," she murmured, though she couldn't recall where she had heard the cat's name before. Shadow looked up at her, his gaze penetrating and unsettling. The first few nights were uneventful, but Sarah began to notice strange occurrences. Shadow seemed to be everywhere, appearing and disappearing in the blink of an eye. He would sit in Emily's room, staring at the corners as if guarding against unseen threats. Tom dismissed her concerns, attributing them to the stress of moving. One evening, while Sarah was tucking Emily into bed, Emily whispered, "Shadow talks to me at night." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What does he say, sweetie?" Emily looked thoughtful. "He tells me stories about the people who lived here before us. He says he's protecting us." Sarah forced a smile, though unease gnawed at her. "That's nice of him, isn't it?" Emily nodded, already drifting off to sleep. Shadow leapt onto the bed, curling up next to her with an air of ownership. That night Sarah couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, haunted by Emily's words. She decided to do some research, hoping to find a logical explanation for her daughter's imagination. In the dusty archives of the local library, she found records of the house's previous owners. Each family had one thing in common. They had all disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The most chilling part was that every record mentioned Shadow, the immortal cat who had been present for each disappearance. Sarah's blood ran cold as she read the final entry. "The Connors family moved in last week. Shadow has taken an interest in their young daughter." She slammed the book shut, heart pounding. She had to protect her family. That night she told Tom everything, but he laughed it off. "Sarah, it's just a cat. You're letting these old stories get to you." Desperation set in. She couldn't convince Tom, and she couldn't leave with Emily in the middle of the night. She decided to confront Shadow herself. At midnight, she found him in the living room, sitting on the antique rug, his eyes glowing in the darkness. "Shadow," she whispered, her voice trembling, "what do you want from us?" Shadow blinked slowly, almost thoughtfully. Then, in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of time, he spoke. "I protect this house and those within it, but those who try to leave without my permission, they never succeed." Sarah's knees buckled, and she clutched the edge of the sofa for support. "Why? Why do you do this?" Shadow's eyes narrowed. "This house is my domain. I was bound to it long ago, by powers you cannot comprehend. I do not wish to harm you, but I cannot let you leave." Sarah backed away, her mind racing. She had to find a way to break Shadow's hold over them. She spent the next day researching every folklore and legend she could find, but the solution remained elusive. That night she awoke to a soft whisper. "Mommy, come play with us." Emily's voice called from the hallway. Sarah followed the voice, finding Emily standing with Shadow at the top of the stairs. "Emily, come back to bed," Sarah pleaded. But Emily only smiled. "Shadow says we can stay forever, Mommy. Isn't that wonderful?" Panic surged through Sarah. She lunged forward, grabbing Emily, but Shadow leapt in front of her, hissing. His eyes glowed brighter, and suddenly Sarah found herself paralyzed, unable to move or speak. "You cannot take her," Shadow intoned. "She belongs to the house now." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she watched Emily walk away, hand in paw with the ancient cat. Darkness closed in around her, and she felt herself slipping away, her consciousness fading into a void. When Sarah awoke, it was morning. Emily and Tom were gone. The house was eerily silent. She wandered through the empty rooms, calling their names, but there was no response. In the living room, she found Shadow sitting on the rug, his eyes now dull and lifeless. He looked at her, and for a moment she saw a flicker of sorrow in his gaze. "You are free to leave," he said quietly. "But know this, the house never forgets, and it always calls its children back." With that, Shadow vanished, leaving Sarah alone in the haunted house, a prisoner of its dark history and the immortal cat who had bound them all to its fate.